Thank you so much for being here. You've been House Minority Leader for years now. You have seen the dysfunction that we've been watching in Jeff City. If you flip the governor's office blue, which hasn't happened in more than a decade, you're still going to be working with a lot of red. So how do you reach through the gridlock and try to get stuff done in Jeff City?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. But yeah, that's the reality of the state of Missouri right now. And that's one of the reasons that I think I am best suited for this role, because I have been the Democratic leader for the last 6 years in the House and been able to work across the aisle, not only passing good legislation, but finding places where we can stop bad things from happening, but building relationships with the Republican leadership over the years. And I will be able to continue that in the governor's office.
How do you do that? Because we've seen, especially in the Senate, which you would have to be working closely with if elected governor, the conservative caucus or whatever they want to call themselves in next session, really kind of putting a wrench in the works for some big bills, and that has helped Democrats in some cases. In some cases, it has not. So what is the plan? Because you have those relationships, but even people who have relationships, it seems in Jeff City, have had strained relationships as of late.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I will really lean into what I've always done. When I first ran in 2016, becoming the only elected Democrat in the southern half of Missouri, I had my yard signs right next to Donald Trump yard signs in the exact same yard. And not necessarily because we agreed on everything. Obviously, we disagree on a lot, but all Missourians want access to education that is good for their kiddos. You know, everybody talks about the fact that our hospitals are closing and it's so hard to get access to an affordable doctor. You know, all of these issues that I hear the most about are nonpartisan. And so the how is making sure that we're prioritizing those issues that matter most to folks and getting rid of the noise. You know, we've seen so much of this partisan back and forth, mainly because we have so many Republicans who are running against each other in these primaries. And so as governor, I'll really dig into those issues that matter most to folks that aren't partisan.
Trying to break through that is tough too, even just on a local level with people just living in Kansas City or another town in Missouri. Just trying to have that conversation where it doesn't immediately go to a one side or the other. What are you seeing in your travels across Missouri when it comes to what's the most important issue to the voters that you're talking to?
Yeah, you know, we're hearing everywhere a conversation around government overreach, and that brings into conversation the abortion initiative, of course, and having politicians in our doctor's offices, but also into our public school systems, our public libraries. You know, we have seen folks in the legislature try to completely defund these library systems. And of course, healthcare is a conversation that we're hearing everywhere. And again, those are sometimes partisan issues, but mainly just folks who want government out of their lives and want government to perform the duties that it's promised.
You mentioned reproductive rights, which is front and center this year, especially looking to see the constitutional amendment on the ballot in November. You know, you have been pushing for women's rights in Jeff City. Haven't gotten a lot of traction because the makeup of the House and Senate. What will you do as governor to try to further enshrine those rights? Even if this ballot petition initiative passes, we have seen, especially over the border in Kansas, lawmakers still trying to further restrict abortions.
Yeah, well, I would say as the only woman and only mother in this race, obviously this is deeply personal for me. And yes, I've been in Jefferson City as they have continued to go after reproductive health care. And not just in abortion, we're hearing senators talk about IVF right now and how they don't think that that should be legally allowed. And so as governor, I will do everything in my power to uphold the will of voters, which we know in November they're going to overturn this draconian ban and give rights back to the citizens of Missouri. And so we'll make sure that the people's voices are heard.
What are you looking at as far as a forecast in November if that gets voters to the polls as far as the makeup of the House and Senate? Would more Democrats be elected, do you think?
Absolutely. We're going to break the Republican supermajorities in both the House and Senate this year. We are only 3 seats away in the House and 2 in the state Senate. So we know voters are going to come out and support us. But we also know Republicans are going to retain control. It's going to be a very long time before Democrats are competitive in that space. And that, again, goes back to your first question of why it's so important to elect somebody who has those relationships and knows how to work across the aisle.
What's issue number one for you? Like if you take the oath of office, you walk in, what's the first thing you do?
You know, I like to talk about this, not just day one. It's going to take several days to accomplish the things that we want to do. But first and foremost is ensuring that the promises made to Missouri citizens through our state agencies and what services we're supposed to provide are adequate. I hear all the time about people who call into Medicaid and are on wait times for 4+ hours. We have been dinged for so many of our services, from foster care to putting folks who are in mental health crises in nursing homes most recently. And so day one, the first 100 days, we'll be making sure that our agencies communities are providing the services that we promise.
Here in Kansas City, public safety is top of mind. We have a gun violence problem, to say the least. What do we do? What could you do as governor to try and help with that?
You know, again, this goes back to understanding the makeup of where we are in Jefferson City and what it means to pass legislation here. But as Democratic leader, I have met with law enforcement officials all across the state countless times. And what we hear the most about is making sure that they are provided what they need to be successful. That is making sure that we're fully staffed, that we're funding the trainings. But I believe also in providing local control back for Kansas City, but also for all of our municipalities and local law enforcement to decide what works for their communities. What works for, you know, in Webster County, Missouri, where I grew up, is very different than what Kansas City's needs are. And so I think we should be entrusting these local leaders and law enforcement to help determine what those are.
And that's been really interesting. We talk about the referendum that's coming up in August for KCPD funding. It's a statewide vote. That's sort of what you're talking about here, just trying to localize it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I don't think that somebody in Joplin, Missouri should be telling Kansas City what they should be doing for their local communities and vice versa. I know folks in Joplin don't want Kansas City and St. Louis dictating what they do. And so I really believe in local control when it comes to this conversation.
If you make it through the primaries, then what? What is the Democratic path to victory here? We know that Democrats in Missouri have lost some support in rural and suburban areas. How do you make that up?
Yeah, it is no secret that we've got to do both and. We've got to turn out our base, but we also need to show up in these rural communities. And what I'm doing is building a winning coalition. You know, we have endorsements from our labor unions at AFL-CIO to the Sierra Club to Planned Parenthood, and we'll continue that coalition building into the general.
Your opponent is an outsider, self-proclaimed outsider, says that that's the look that we need in Missouri. What's your take on that?
You know, I think what we need in Missouri is somebody who understands what regular folks are going through. I'm the very first in my family to graduate high school. I worked my way through college. I got involved in politics because I felt like regular working class folks' voices were missing from the conversation, and that's what I'm going to bring to the table.
We've seen record surpluses in Missouri. What would you do with that money if elected governor, and would you cut taxes? What's your plan?
Yeah, first and foremost, again, is making sure that the promises that we provide to our citizens are paid for. I look at our budget as a moral document, and quite frankly, we haven't been leading in a very moral way, in my opinion. People know we have some of the lowest paid teachers in the entire country. Our public education system is drastically underfunded. We've had 18 rural hospitals close in the last 10 years. We are drastically underfunding our folks with developmental disabilities, all of our healthcare spaces, and we could dive into the conversation around housing and addiction and our veterans. All of these things that I know Missouri citizens really want to be paid for, not, you know, these pork and special interest, you know, things that we're seeing built in people's backyard. We need to be investing in infrastructure. We still have so many places in our state that don't have broadband internet access. So those basic things are going to be what I'm going to focus on.
All right, we'll leave it there. Crystal, thank you very much.
Thank you.